I've been talking about the eventual birth of the Cardano Layerverse every year for the last 3 years now. Well, welcome to the delivery room. The time has finally come. If you think the people in today's thumbnail are probably more concerned about finding food, water, and shelter than they are about being in any kind of Layerverse, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies DRep address and the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. We have been talking about this topic for so long. Look at this. Back on September 9th, 2021, Cardano and the Layerverse. This was just a couple of weeks before the Cardano Wyoming Summit that happened, I believe, on September 25th and 26th-ish, 2021. Then in March 2022, Cardano's Hungry Layerverse. See, the Layerverse got hungry there. Then we had Cardano's Layerverse, January 2023, just about a year and 10 months ago. Here we are. It's 2024, almost 2025, and we're about to see the actual emergence of something that looks like one of the first big layers in the Cardano Layerverse. Why is this a big deal? Before we talk about the Cardano Layerverse and why it's important, we first have to make sure everybody understands what this whole crypto thing is all about. So it turns out the main pursuit in crypto can be summed up by this concept we refer to as the blockchain trilemma. The blockchain trilemma is the idea that in crypto, we're trying to optimize three things simultaneously, and it's difficult. It's difficult to optimize these things at the same time. They are security, scalability, and decentralization. A lot of people are tempted to add a fourth leg to the blockchain trilemma and start talking about programmability, but really, we've got blockchains with varying degrees of programmability, like Bitcoin, not much, largely. Ethereum, Cardano, a lot more programmability. But let's set that aside for now and just talk about these three legs of the blockchain trilemma that apply to blockchains regardless of their level of programmability. And yes, programmability can play into these in many different ways, but let's put that aside for now. We've got blockchains that optimize these three legs differently. Everybody's not hitting the same levels on each of these three legs. For instance, the security leg, we've got a lot of blockchains that have gone really far in the direction of scalability, or far enough on the decentralization leg, and they're really lagging in terms of security. These are the robbery forest blockchains. These are blockchains, if you are the prince in the magical kingdom of crypto, these are the places you go. This is like the forest you go to if you want all of your jewels to be stolen. Your treasure chest full of gold and jewels. If you want those stolen, you go to the robbery forest blockchains, and we've got a bunch of them. We've got a bunch of them. There are a lot of blockchains that have optimized for scalability. So we've got a lot that haven't done great on security. We've got a lot that have optimized scalability. It's not too hard to get pretty far down the scalability road, especially by sacrificing decentralization. Basically, you could run an Excel spreadsheet. Famously, we say that blockchain is no better than an Excel spreadsheet because an Excel spreadsheet can be run by one person. It's a level of decentralization equivalent to zero, one person. There is zero decentralization. There's one central point, and this can be very scalable. You can just run the entire blockchain on a very centralized basis, sacrifice decentralization, and hit a high level of scalability. Then you've got decentralization. Like I said, this is everyone's favorite leg to sacrifice. Like, people aren't really shooting to sacrifice security or scalability, but we do see a lot of blockchains intentionally sacrificing decentralization in the name of scalability, especially. And then their lack of security, their being in the robbery forest, is just kind of a side effect of a bunch of other choices they made, usually to optimize scalability. So, what has Cardano done? Cardano is kind of an outlier. Cardano definitely optimized decentralization and security. And we're doing okay on scalability, but we definitely did these two first. Cardano is very secure. It's Cardano is a land of is a land of formal methods and functional programming, and it's extremely decentralized. Our Nakamoto coefficient is crazy. Our minimum attack vector is very high. It takes a lot of different parties to attack Cardano. It's a lot of different parties to achieve the percentage control of the blockchain you would need to mess with Cardano. We've definitely optimized for these things. But what we know is that the market demands different compromises. So some of these blockchains that have compromised decentralization in the name of scalability are doing quite well right now. And we can come up with a lot of rationalizations. We can explain it away. Like, someday they'll pay the price for their lack of decentralization. The DOJ could shut down that blockchain. There are a lot of different things we could say about these non decentralized blockchains. But another thing you can say is that there are certain segments of the market that demand these types of blockchains. And we can't really have both on the base layer on the L1 of Cardano. We can't both be extremely decentralized and make this compromise where we sacrifice decentralization at the same time. We're kind of stuck with this awesome compromise between the three where we have very high decentralization, very high security. Cardano is certainly a very secure blockchain. We have had very, very few exploits, very few robbery forced events. But we're still developing scalability. Kind of famously, Cardano goes at a we'll call it an intentional pace. The critics would call it a glacial pace. We'll call it an intentional, well thought out pace. This is the pace of Cardano. We're all familiar with it. You wouldn't be in Cardano if you weren't comfortable with that. However, market demand is for various different things. People come to crypto for various different things. A lot of us are in Cardano because we love the security, we love the decentralization. But there are other people who come to crypto because they want greater scalability. And that's where the Cardano Layerverse comes in. If you've been around this channel for a while, none of that information is new to you. Here's the part that is new. We now have Midnight, the first big layer in the Cardano Layerverse, live at least on testnet. And I know some of you are going to be quibbling. There was this side chain and this project and that project. True, true. There have been other layers, if you will, to the Cardano Layerverse, but none of them have had as much promise as Midnight. And part of that is due to how Midnight's going to be launched. But first, let's just talk real quickly about what Midnight is. Here's the Midnight Night paper. So Midnight is, as much as we just talked all about the blockchain trilemma, it's more than just a different compromise on the different legs of the blockchain trilemma. If we go down here to one of the first pages, the first substantive pages in the Night paper, here's what they say about Midnight Learnable. And this is, of course, one of the aspects of Midnight I've talked a lot about in the past. Midnight's TypeScript smart contracts framework alleviates the need to learn and maintain code that requires niche programming skills. As of the first half of 2024, TypeScript is the second most popular programming language. We've talked about all that before. And of course, we have other programming languages in Cardano. We've got the very popular Aiken. We've even got PluTS, which is a TypeScript programming language for Cardano. But there's something different about Midnight, and I think TypeScript is an important part of all that. But let's talk about the other aspects of Midnight. Midnight is versatile, according to the Night paper. Midnight's ledger supports shielded and unshielded data primitives, enabling developers to exercise selective disclosure. This is really important for regulatory reasons, for all the reasons we've talked about in the past, because you might need to prove that your user, if you're a company with a DApp, on the Cardano network. We'll say the greater Cardano ecosystem, because Midnight is a part of the greater Cardano ecosystem, but it's a partner chain. It's not the same chain as the base layer. But you might need to prove that a user of your DApp is not in a rogue state like North Korea. You might want to prove that they're not that one hacking entity in North Korea that seems to be able to hack everybody in crypto. They even have people on the teams. Like, crypto projects are hiring these North Korean hackers as members of their teams, not realizing they're North Korean hackers. You might need to prove that someone is not in North Korea, but you don't really need for them to put their home address on the chain for everyone to see. This is what Midnight accomplishes. One of the many things it can accomplish with its shielded, unshielded dual nature. Midnight is composable. You can use it as a layer 1 or a layer 2. It uses TypeScript API definitions, so it can easily integrate with existing systems. The ZK architecture makes it easily pair with existing non-ZK chains like Ethereum and Cardano, hints as to where this thing is really aimed. It's also scalable. It uses Kachina-based ZK architecture. You know, if you've been watching Charles's AMAs all these years, he has a bunch of Kachina dolls right behind that desk where he and the microphone and the lobster, what's his name? Logan, I think. He and Logan and the microphone, and then you got the Kachina dolls back there because he's been fascinated by Kachina for quite a while. They say multiple apps may run simultaneously on the same chain with lower transaction contention. If you're around during the early days of Cardano dApps, you know contention was something we talked about all the time. Here they've got a way for multiple apps to run on the same chain with less contention. This all sounds fantastic, but all of these things described here, I mean, there are other ways we've addressed these things on the base layer. Like I said, we've got, we even already have TypeScript. We've got PluTS that allows you to use TypeScript to program Cardano smart contracts. We have addressed composability and scalability and versatility in other ways. So what's so special about Midnight? Well, I think psychologically, one of the biggest things about Midnight is this name. It's really an extension of the Cardano ecosystem. And if you had called it Cardano Privacy Partner Chain, it would have a very different impact inside crypto than this brand new chain called Midnight that has a totally different logo, totally different name, and in fact goes out of its way to call itself a different blockchain, much to the consternation of a lot of people in Cardano. But actually, I think this is genius. Charles always brings a fresh look. He didn't just rebuild Ethereum. He didn't just rebuild Bitcoin. He could have done either one and probably would have done just fine. Instead, he created a third gen blockchain that had programmability, used an extended UTXO architecture. It was something brand new. It was a fresh look at what blockchains could be. And that's what Midnight is too. It's a fresh perspective on what a blockchain could be. We won't get into the whole discussion about whether or not this is a Gen 4 blockchain, Gen 3 blockchain, and whether we should even be using labels about that, like that. Who cares? But it is this blockchain focused on privacy. It has a brand new name. And I think this is really important for one of the most important things about Midnight that a lot of people haven't been talking about as much. And that's that this is a great vehicle for marketing, onboarding, and adoption. Like I said, if you tried to call this Cardano Privacy Partner Chain and then marketed it to the wider crypto audience, it probably would not do as well. Why? Because there are stereotypes about Cardano. These stereotypes about Cardano moving at this very intentional, research oriented, very formal pace that some would call glacial. People are scared of how slowly and deliberately Cardano moves. If you say the name Cardano to a crypto developer, if they know anything about Cardano development, they're probably going to say, "Oh, you need Haskell." And I know, we have Aiken, we have all these other languages they could possibly use, both imperative and functional. I know, and we're all very grateful for the developers who've created those languages. Extremely grateful for the existence of those languages and all the hard work that's gone into creating them. However, people outside of Cardano don't really know. They don't know about those languages. They don't know about Aiken. They don't know about PluTS. They don't know about any of the other languages at all. All they know is they hear the word Cardano, and you ask them about development on Cardano, and one of the first words out of their mouth is Haskell, which is problematic because, like we've talked about many times on this channel, it's a small number of developers who even want to learn Haskell, who know about Haskell, who are interested in Haskell. But if we tell them not, hey, we've got a brand new thing called Cardano Privacy Partner Chain, Cardano Shielded Partner Chain, if instead of telling them that, we say, hey, there's this brand new blockchain called Midnight, and you can use TypeScript. And it has this cool dual thing where you can shield data or not shield data, and look at the cool use cases for regulatory compliance that brings to the table. Look at how they're using Kachina-based ZK technology to allow you to integrate whatever you're doing on blockchain, whatever you're already doing on blockchains like Cardano and Ethereum. This is a brand new name for a brand new perspective on how cryptos should run. Is this a replacement for Cardano? No, it's an extension of the greater Cardano ecosystem. That's really what these layers in the Layerverse are going to be. People shouldn't say, hey, Midnight is better than or worse than Cardano. That's not really how this works, because what we want is for companies to come along and give us the kind of gift that IOG is giving us with Midnight. Did I have to pay? Like, I'm pretty involved in the Cardano ecosystem. Did I have to pay anything at all for Midnight to exist? No, it's a gift from Charles. This is a gift from Charles and all the people who work very, very hard at IOG. They're giving us Midnight. We all get to benefit from the existence of Midnight for free, for nothing, which is exactly the same way it's been kind of all along. Sure, IOG and Charles got a small allotment of some of the founder tokens in Cardano, some of the founder ADA, but they've also been working for us all this time since since the chain launched in 2017. They've been working for us for free basically this whole time. And here they are once again. They're like, hey, let's get this Layerverse launched. Let's launch the first monster layer. Let's do it for free and just give it to the Cardano ecosystem. This is great. Should we think about it as Cardano base layer versus Midnight? Would we change some of the compromises, some of the features, some of the things they did with Midnight? Should we be arguing over how the night tokens are going to be distributed? Not really, because we got it for free. A lot of people are looking at gift horse in the mouth here. This thing is free. Who's paying for all the marketing for it? IOG. Who built the thing? IOG. who's contributing all of their ideas to this ecosystem that we all are gonna, we all have this opportunity to participate in? IOG. They're giving all this to us for free. And they're doing some genius things with the launch of Midnight. And this is the real gift. I mean, they could have just created Midnight, not figured out a novel way to launch it, not figured out a way to make it this, what could be, we don't know yet, but what could be this giant onboarding machine. They could have just launched it and it would still be cool. I would still be doing this video talking about how cool it is. We have this way to comply with regulators by giving them exactly the information they require and not the rest of the information. Even just that part would be cool. Even just the selection of TypeScript for a large partner chain like this would be cool. But on top of that, like always, Charles brings a brand new, fresh angle to everything. He came up with this very interesting way to use the launch of Midnight to onboard a bunch of people to the greater Cardano ecosystem from other chains. Another huge gift to the Cardano ecosystem. So, how is Midnight going to become this potentially gigantic onboarding and adoption vehicle? Let's let Charles explain this part.
And then there's a question of incentives and distribution. Ordinarily, because I've been in the space so long, I kind of know all the dirty tricks. What you do is you go to a VC, they give you a bunch of money, they get founder tokens, and then they dump on retail when the network launches. You know who you are. You do. And they make great money. And then the ecosystem collapses, and the next thing goes, the next thing goes, the next thing goes. That's not how we get ahead. So instead, here's what we do. Just do something called a glacier drop. So you take 135 million accounts across all the major cryptocurrencies and just airdrop to them. And if people want it, they mine it. In the process of mining it, they launch the network.
So they're going to do this glacier drop thing where they're going to make tokens available to 135 million wallets, million addresses at least. And the people who those tokens are available to, and I'm guessing there are going to be a lot of users on a bunch of these blockchains and probably some other ones, but I'm sure it's going to be Bitcoin, Ethereum, and then the list becomes a little more hazy. Obviously, Cardano. Then the list becomes a little bit more hazy, but across a whole bunch of different chains, a whole bunch of people are going to be able to come and get this night token. And Charles, all along, I think for many months, he's been saying that you would probably have to do something to get the token. Here, he used the word mine it, and of course, it's very possible he just means do something by that, because the only blockchains where people are used to doing any kind of mining are proof of work blockchains. And who knows, maybe he's come up with some kind of valuable form of work for people to do to get those tokens. But it sounds like people are going to have to do something to get the tokens. The really cool part, though, is that Night is going to be a Cardano native asset, at least at first. So, what I'm hoping happens here, what could be the case, is that people are, and there've been a few little comments that have kind of implied this, that all these users of these other chains are going to have to come into either Cardano or Midnight to grab these tokens. And in the process of grabbing these tokens, they will have already basically used the greater Cardano ecosystem, whether that happens on the Cardano base layer, and then they have to migrate off the base layer to take their tokens back to their native blockchains with them through some kind of bridging or something, who knows. But they're going to have to come into the greater Cardano ecosystem. And in doing so, they will learn a little bit about either Cardano or Midnight, all of these people. Because one thing that people love in crypto is to get something free, especially something a little speculative, because just like all crypto assets, nobody knows how much the Night token is going to be worth in the future. And that uncertainty, that speculative nature of the token, means a lot of people are going to be very happy to go and grab this token. If it's some, small amount of work, mining, validating, useful work, whatever it is people have to do to get this token, whatever it is they have to do. Who knows? Maybe it's like learning. Maybe they have to go through and like learn some things about Midnight and take some easy quiz or something. I don't know. Whatever it is to get this token, people are going to have to interact with either Midnight or Cardano or both. But the greater Cardano ecosystem, this is a fantastic thing, because a lot of people all along in Cardano have said, if only we could just get people to come over here and use Cardano a little bit, just enter the ecosystem a little bit, then they'd probably be pretty happy with what they found, because there's some serious advantages of Cardano over some of the other blockchains. Like, we don't turn it on and off like they do on some other blockchains. We don't have these massive robbery forest incidents, at least we haven't so far. We have a very high level of decentralization. We have a very strong community, pound for pound, I think the strongest community in all of crypto. But people haven't been able to experience that because somebody who's a partisan of the Ethereum network doesn't really have a lot of reason to come over into Cardano and experience what we have going on here. Midnight is going to be that reason, because there won't be this big stigma, there won't be this big stereotype around the Cardano name. It's not Cardano, it's Midnight. People will happily go to this new chain called Midnight, probably to pick up these tokens. At least we hope they will. 135 million addresses. That is a gigantic number of crypto users. What if the work they have to do is that they have to set up a Midnight wallet that also works as a Cardano wallet? What if 135 million people all of a sudden have a strong economic incentive to gather up this speculative asset? What if they all of a sudden have this gigantic economic incentive to open up a wallet, to download a wallet that works for Midnight that also coincidentally works for Cardano. How many new users are brought into the Cardano ecosystem by something like that? We don't know. It's hard to say with these new novel kinds of things, especially in crypto, which itself, even though it's been around, over a decade now, what is it? We're coming up on 15 years pretty soon here. Even though we've almost been around a decade and a half, there is always a chance that things won't work. It won't work quite like you think. It works to a different extent than you think. All of these things could happen. Many different things are possible here, but this is one of the biggest potential adoption events in the history of Cardano for a long, long time. I mean, Cardano has a great community, but what if we can onboard even some fraction? Pick your fraction, however well you think this will work, of those 135 million addresses. How many of them, if this is structured in some very cool way to get them to download, say, a Cardano compatible wallet and use a Cardano native asset, how many of them will end up being exposed to Cardano for the very first time? This can be very powerful. And then when they realize that validation in Midnight is going to work off Minotaur, which means it's going to be multi consensus, which means could be proof of work, proof of stake, proof of whatever. We've talked about this before. And they realize that something like Midnight or any other partner chain in the greater Cardano ecosystem that works the same way could be used as a service by their Ethereum dApps. An Ethereum dApp could just, make queries to a partner chain like Midnight if to the extent that other partner chains are set up like Midnight, they could just do queries through the API and use Midnight as sort of like an L2. It would just look like an L2 to them, and they're querying it through API. And then all of a sudden, they can make use of whatever service that partner chain provides. In the case of Midnight, it would probably be this dual shielded, unshielded nature. So they could query Midnight. It'll look just like an L2 to them. They're just using an API, which is something they're going to be familiar with anyways. This could be one of these gigantic adoption events. And I don't think, no matter how wonderful the underlying functionality or the novelty of it is, I don't think it would be as successful if this was called Cardano shielded, unshielded, dual nature, privacy partner chain. I don't think it would be as successful. I think the branding is a big piece of this. I think it being TypeScript is a huge piece of this. I think the Kachina based ZK technology that's wrapped up in Midnight is a big piece of this. All of this together, this is a great way for Cardano, the greater Cardano ecosystem, to sort of enter this new era of being a layerverse. We've got this really reliable base layer, the Cardano L1, super reliable. It's not a part of the robbery forest. It's very, very decentralized. We have this great community behind it. And on top of this, we can build whatever arbitrary layers we want, and any of those layers could be just like Midnight in that they could be a service provider to other blockchains, whatever blockchain, and they could just be queried through API. I think this is the beginning of a very bright future. It's like anything else in crypto. We could be wrong. It could be a gigantic dud, nothing happens. It could be a fantastic moment of triumph. It could be a moment of nothing burgers, and then it blossoms into a gigantic triumph. We don't know. But as far as Charles and the people over at IOG cooking up what could be a tremendous adoption vehicle for the greater Cardano ecosystem, I don't know how they could have come up with something better at this point in time in crypto. Speaking of this point in time in crypto, let's talk a little bit about the political landscape. Okay, we're not really going to talk about politics, not substantively at least. We're going to talk about something else. We're going to talk about why Kamala is getting all of my posting venom on X right now. And I can tell it's not really what some of you think. It's not because she's a Democrat. It's not really this red and blue thing this election cycle, at least not from the perspective of crypto. It's really about something else. It's really this. This is a page from Nate Silver's new book, On the Edge: The Art of Risking Everything, that came out just in August, just, like a month and change ago. This book came out. This is a page from that book. This is an illustration of a concept that I think is conceptually dividing the world in ways that are more important for crypto than the whole red versus blue, D versus R thing. This is really what's going on. Let me explain. Nate Silver thinks the world is sort of divided between the village and the river. And I think he's right. And his sort of labels for these two different camps are useful when thinking about what's going on in crypto right now and what's going on in the political landscape and the intersection of those two things, where the Venn diagram intersects between those two. This is a great framework for thinking about this. I think it does explain everything, and it definitely explains why Kamala is the one who's getting all my venom on an X right now. So you've got the village. The village is the college educated, East Coast style elite expert class. People who work in government, academia, mainstream media. It's the Ivy League, the New York Times, and the culture of vibes and appearances and virtue signaling related to all of those things. And notice I'm not saying it's everybody who works in academia, everybody who works in mainstream media, everybody who works in government. Those things just are the epitome of the village. And a lot of the people in those sectors, in those areas, are the epitome of the village. The biggest danger in the village is being canceled, being ostracized, being cast out of the village. Risk doesn't make sense in the village. Conformity and fitting in, above all, is how you win in the village. These are the normies, the establishment. They tend to want to boss the masses around in service of their conformity and vibes and virtue signaling and appearances. In order for their perspective on the world to work, they need to pressure the masses to fit in with their conformity, their style of conformity. The river, on the other hand, is all about risk taking and capitalism and winning and results and risk taking and being data driven, entrepreneurship, being highly competitive, innovation, and actually serving markets. The river is about results, not appearances, and you need to take risks and forge your own path and do what the herd is not doing. It's Silicon Valley, it's Wall Street, it's the gambling industry. It's all of those things. It's the exact opposite of the village. The village is very firmly entrenched left of center. No surprise, given what we said the village is. The river, on the other hand, is all over the place politically, from far left to far right, since membership is based on valuable results and not conformity to the group doctrine. It's all about competition and arriving at the right result. It's not about how you look doing it. It's not about the vibes and the virtue signaling and the appearances. It's about the actual result. Crypto is clearly in the river. Crypto is basically the most river thing ever. You don't get a Satoshi or an Elon or AI or a Charles Hoskinson or even the internet without the river. The village can't create those things because risk and individualism and standing out are too dangerous there. And what I just gave you, this is a page from Nate Silver's book, but what I just gave you there is my take on the river versus the village. I'm not saying he would say those same things, that those same things, those ideas fit into necessarily exactly into his conception of the village and the river. But I think the overall distinction between these two camps is correct. The Biden Harris administration's treatment of crypto, Gary Gensler, the Dragon, Operation Choke Point 2.0, things we've talked about a million times on this channel. Those things are not about red versus blue. I know a lot of you think these are just red versus blue issues. They're not. It's not about red versus blue. It's not about D versus R. It's about the village waging total war on us in the river. Crypto is firmly, obviously, an extreme representation of the river and all the things I just described. The village can't have that. If people are seeing great success in crypto, that's that's the exact opposite of the village and its ideals. The ideals of the river are very different. And this extreme representation of the river, if it exists and it's seeing success and innovations happening there and beneficial things are happening for the world and this extreme representation of the river, that's anathema to the village. They have to try to destroy that. Like I said, people in the river, they could be far left, they could be far right, they could be centrist, they could be anywhere on the political spectrum. It's about the results, not the doctrine. But the village, it's all about the doctrine and the appearance of conformity to the doctrine. They can't have us seeing success out here in this extreme end of the river. They have to reach out and try to stop all of that. That's why Kamala is getting all my venom on X, because she represents she was half of the Biden Harris administration and everything they did to us for the last 4 years. Gary Gensler, the Dragon, Operation Choke Point 2.0. It's not about the red versus blue thing. It's about the village trying to crush the river. And that we can't have, because the river, the risk taking, the innovation, the capitalism, all these things, they actually do arrive. It prizes arriving at this result that's actually good for humans. I'm not saying that everything in the river is good for humans. Definitely things happen on Wall Street that are just about money. Things happen in the gambling industry. Maybe you could argue everything in the gambling industry is just about making money. Those things are certainly true, but the river is also the place where all the innovation happens, all the entrepreneurship. Like I said, you don't have these Satoshis, these Elons. You don't arrive at AI. You don't even arrive at the internet without the river. That's why it's so important that the village, in its latest attempts to just wholesale reach out and destroy the river, that's why it's so important that the village not succeed in this. Humans as a whole need the river. They need all of us river denizens to be out here doing our thing. And that's why I've been focusing so much on this election cycle, because I think it's going to represent either the continued oppression of the river by the village, or the river standing up and succeeding in its fight against the village for this cycle. It'll go on forever. The village will always be trying to oppress the river, and the river will always be doing its thing, standing up, refusing to conform to the norms of the village. But I think it's especially pronounced this cycle, and I think it's important that the river not get crushed by the village. One final note: if crypto is the most river thing ever, then Elon is the most river dude ever. And he recently had a pretty interesting event. So you probably watched this. Elon's got robo taxis. He's got these robo vans that he's calling robovans. I don't know if that's a good branding call, whatever. But he's also got a bunch of actual robots now. The robots are doing really interesting things. The robots are talking. They sound exactly like real humans. They're tending bar at this event. They're walking around talking to people. Elon is obviously a lot further along in the Optimus program than I think a lot of people thought. Why is this interesting for crypto? Aside from crypto being a river thing and Elon being basically the king of the river, this is important for crypto for another reason. We've talked about a lot on this channel over the years. I've always maintained that AI and advanced robotics, advanced humanoid robotics, are all going to be net positive for crypto. Why? Because is a guy like Elon going to allow the JP Morgans of the world, the Visas of the world to penetrate his hardware kingdom? Is he going to have the robots paying for stuff with dollar bills and Chase accounts? No, he is not. Elon is going to choose the river like he always has. He's going to use, in my opinion, it would be completely out of character for the king of the river to use anything but crypto as the means of payment for these AIs, for these robots, whatever combination of those you wanna think about. And I mean, people are going to be using their robots to do a lot of things that will require the robots to pay for things. If you have an Optimus in your house, Elon says they're gonna be like 20 or 30 grand, in Elon talk, that probably means they'll start out being 400 grand or something. But eventually, if people actually do have these Optimus robots, just like he said, "Hey, a lot of people are going to have EVs," back in the day before anyone actually had EVs, now a lot of people have them. The same thing happens with the Optimus robots. Then People are gonna use these Optimus robots to pay for things, and they're gonna send I mean, they might go to the store, your Optimus robot might jump in a cyber cab, go to the store to buy something for you. I know, really, we're probably just gonna have everything delivered, but let's say the robot is going out in the world doing things for you. You can imagine the robot's gonna need to pay for things. Is the robot gonna use cash? Is he gonna carry around a robot purse and pay with cash? No, he is not. Is Elon going to invite JP Morgan Chase into the world of Tesla, and every Optimus is gonna have a JP Morgan Chase account or a Visa account? Probably not. Elon loves crypto. At least he loves Doge. But I think these robots are gonna pay for things with crypto. I think a lot of AIs that maybe aren't even embodied in robotics are going to need to pay for things in the world, and I think the means of that payment is definitely going to be crypto. This is down the road. This is all down the road, but I think everything that we saw at this robo-taxi Optimus unveil event, from Tesla, I think all this portends a future that's very net positive for crypto. I hope you're having a great start to your week, and I'll talk to you soon.